On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me as I discuss the heartbreaking case of Anita Cobby, the nurse who was abducted, raped and murdered on her way home from work. This murder rocked Australia to its core, and the 5 men involved were one of the very first to ever have never to be released marked on their files. Hi everyone, welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated. I am your host Belinda Brady and welcome guys, welcome to episode 20, Big 2-0, and this episode is titled Never to be Released, The Brutal Murder of Anita Cobby. Now straight up, I'm giving you a heads up. This episode discusses rape and murder, bestiality, and does have swearing in it. So listener discretion is advised with this episode, guys. And I will state my sources straight up. www.theguardian.com, nepeannews.com.au, news.com.au, goldcoastbulletin.com.au. Okay, and what am I drinking today? Well, it is a dreary and cold and wet afternoon where I am recording this in my part of Australia. So autumn is well and truly here. So I am drinking a milky, creamy latte and I'm loving it. So whatever you guys are up to, whatever you're doing, if you're driving or if you're at home or if you're chilling or if you're at the gym, I hope you've got something to refresh you, hopefully with a bit of caffeine in it, and lend me your ears. Now, I want to do a real quick shout out to some new listeners who have joined me. I love seeing where you guys are from. Okay, so I've had some listeners join me from Bluffton in Indiana. I've had some join me from Denver, Colorado. I've had some join me from Stokesley, North Yorkshire. I hope I have said that correctly. Bamako, in Bamako. I don't know where that is. If you want to tell me, please do. And of course, Australia, we've got Sydney, we've got Brisbane, we've got Melbourne, and we've got a few from Perth. G'day to all you guys. And we've also got someone from Rotterdam in South Holland and Amsterdam in North Holland. So welcome, guys. Thank you for listening. And I just want to say a quick call to action. If you want to buy me a coffee, you can. The link is up on the Spotify site where you listen to this, and if you buy me a coffee you can get a personalized shout out, which I am more than happy to do. So if that's something you want to do, please feel free. If you want to subscribe, you can subscribe and you will get bonus episodes. And that is it for my little plug. So off we go. Let's get started. Never to be released, the brutal murder of Anita Cobby. You often hear the phrase nature or nurture, and I do use that quite a bit when I discuss crimes in this podcast. And it basically means you are either born a certain way or you adapt to your environment and become what you know. Now, when it comes to the case of nurse Anita Cobby, she was born a beautiful soul. She was friendly, she was caring, she wanted to help people, and her role of a nurse helped her do that. She was a beautiful, beautiful woman, and the men, for want of a better word, who kidnapped, tortured and raped and killed her, well, they were born pure evil. There is no doubt about it. And their actions before they crossed paths with Anita only prove this point further. So settle down, guys, get comfy. Like I said, if you're driving, if you're gymming, if you're chilling, get yourself comfy, get yourself hydrated, get yourself caffeinated, and come with me as we go back to a suburb in Sydney, Australia, New South Wales, called Blacktown in the 1980s, and the murder that broke our hearts. Anita Cobby was born in Sydney, New South Wales on the 2nd of November 1959 to parents Grace and Gary Lynch. Her mother Grace was a nurse and dad Gary was a graphic artist with the Royal Australian Air Force. Now, Anita was a beautiful, beautiful girl inside and out, but she was also stunning on the outside. She had a beautiful smile and she took part in several beauty pageants. And in 1979, she took out the crown of Miss Western Suburbs. Anita had a promising career in modelling, but she decided to follow her mother's footsteps and become a nurse. And it was while she was studying her nursing degree at Sydney Hospital, she met her future husband, John Cobby. Now, the pair married on the 27th of March 1982, but by 1986, the couple had separated and Anita had moved back to the family home in Blacktown. Now, the separation was on good terms. She and John were still getting along and they were talking about getting back together. Anita still worked at the Sydney Hospital where she had met her husband. And on the 2nd of February 1986, she finished her shift at 3 o'clock and her and two friends went to a restaurant in a nearby suburb called Redfern for dinner. Later that night at around 9 p.m, one of her friends dropped her off at Sydney Central Station so she could catch a train home to her parents' house in Blacktown. Her friend watched Anita climb the stairs to the platform, not knowing it would be the last time she would see her friend alive. When Anita arrived at Blacktown Station a while later, normally she would call her father Gary and he would come and pick her up. But on this night, she didn't. And as Anita often pulled a double shift and she would often stay with friends who lived in the city if she did, Gary wasn't too worried when he didn't receive a phone call from her. However, when hospital staff called him the next morning asking why Anita hadn't come into work, knowing this wasn't not like his daughter, he went into an immediate panic and called the police. Now, the police began looking for her straight away because it was so out of character for her not to be at work and not to get in contact with her dad. And meanwhile, Gary and Grace desperately clung on to the hope that, Anita would come home, and she just wasn't able to get in contact or just forgot. On the 4th of February 1986, Farmer John Reen noticed the cows on his property were acting funny and were hanging around a particular spot on his property. Now, his property was located in Prospect, New South Wales, not too far from where Anita got off at the train station at Blacktown. He went to investigate what was going on with his cows, and he found the badly beaten and bruised body of a naked woman. Her throat had been cut so severely she was nearly decapitated. The woman could only be identified by the wedding ring that she was wearing, and she was positively ID'd as Anita Cobby. Anita had suffered a horrifically brutal death. She was beaten black and blue, was sexually assaulted repeatedly, had several bones broken, and like I said before, had her throat cut so severely she was almost decapitated. Autopsy reports revealed she had been alive when her throat was cut. Now, this crime took place before DNA was around, so if police had DNA back then, they would have found her killers a lot quicker, because I dare say she would have had DNA all over her, but they didn't have DNA back then, so they were at an absolute loss as to who could have done this to Anita. Her husband John was a suspect, but he was quickly ruled out. She was not a party girl. She wasn't into drugs. She did not have a known enemy in the world. They were at an absolute loss as to why this had happened to this beautiful person. The Australian public, and rightly so, once news of this murder broke, reacted with red-hot anger, and the New South Wales state government posted an award of $50,000 for information leading to her killers. On the 6th of February, shock jock and Sydney radio royalty John Laws, who has since retired, leaked Anita's autopsy report on air, shocking the country with the injuries she had sustained. When he was asked about this in an interview in 2016, Laws said the general public ought to know, and that it incited anger in the public that murders like this were happening and we weren't being given the full details. On the 9th of February, police reenacted Anita's last movements, and Constable Debbie Wallace wore similar clothing to Anita on that fateful night as she boarded the 9:21 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown in the hopes it would jog someone's memory, but nothing came of it. But the police caught a break soon enough, with a teenage girl coming forward saying she saw a woman being dragged into a car, kicking and screaming near Blacktown train station. But when her and her brother tried to follow the car a bit later, they lost track of it. And to add on top of this little breakthrough, police didn't have to wait long for their next one, because not long after, they got a tip-off about a stolen Holden, the car suspected in being used in the murder. Now, police were given the names of the people who stole this Holden, and they were names that the police knew all too well. They were John Travis, Michael Murdoch, and brothers Les, Michael, and Gary Murphy. All 5 of these men had previous convictions, over 50 between them, for armed robbery, assault, larceny, car theft, breaking and entering, and rape. John Travis, who sported a teardrop tattoo below his left eye, was the worst of a bad bunch and the ringleader, and he was only 18 at the time of the murder and already had a rap sheet that would make your skin crawl. He was raised in poverty, one of 9 siblings to teenage parents, and he was an alcoholic by 14. He was kicked out of school at the same age and relied on government handouts to survive, as he couldn't hold down a job. He was in and out of juvenile detention centres, and by the time his father finally left the family in 1981, John had to resort to crime to feed his family, such as stealing animals and food from nearby households. His mother was sent to a hospice due to poor health, and John and his siblings were split into different foster care homes. This is when he started to display disturbing, violent sexual behaviour towards both men and women, and he was known for bestiality. In fact, he was known for bringing a live lamb or a sheep to a party, sodomizing it or sexually assaulting it while the poor animal was still alive, and then cutting its throat. Michael Murdoch was a childhood friend of John Travis, a little sidekick, if you like, and he also spent a good part of his childhood and teen years in and out of juvenile detention centres, where he allegedly experienced sexual assaults. Now, the Murphy brothers, Michael, Gary and Les, were 3 brothers from a family of 9 siblings. All 3 were constantly in trouble with the law in their childhoods and in their teen years, and all 3 were just as bad and as easily led as the other. The family was well known to police, and Michael was already infamous for being a give-up for an attempted prison escape in 1978. He was incarcerated in Parramatta Jail at the time and called his mother, telling her he'd be getting out, which of course alerted authorities. So he's not only evil, he's just stupid. And they met John Travis while drinking in pubs around the Doonside area. So, you know, your vibe attracts your tribe, bad attracts bad. This tip-off about the stolen car suspected of being involved in the abduction of Anita led police to search for the men and led to the arrest of Travis and Murdoch, where they were charged with offences related to stolen cars and released on bail. But Travis was detained as he had made a conflicting statement about the murder whilst in custody. And while he was being questioned, he asked if he could call a friend to bring him some cigarettes. And when he provided the phone number of his friend, police swooped in and called her first. Now, the phone number belonged to a woman, a friend of Travis's, and she agreed to help police. Now, she would only be known as Miss X, and when she visited John Travis in jail to give him his cigarettes, she was wearing a wire and eventually got a confession to Anita's murder out of him. She then paid Michael Murdoch a visit, and he too confessed to the crime. John Travis, Les Murphy and Michael Murdoch were charged with Anita's murder on the 24th of February 1986, but their accomplices, Gary and Michael Murphy, were on the run. Their faces were broadcast on every television network and splashed across every front page of the newspapers in this country. And soon enough, police got a call tipping them off that two men were hiding out in a flat in a southwestern suburb of Sydney called Glenfield. An early morning raid found both men inside the flat. Michael was watching TV and Gary made a run for it, but was met with a wall of police and was easily subdued. He also wet his pants in the process. And a newspaper caught this image. They actually took a photo of him being led out of the flat with urine-soaked pants. And that picture was splashed on the front page of newspapers countrywide for everyone to see. And I've also included this picture on my TikTok page about this episode if you want to go and have a look. All 5 men were charged with Anita's murder, and all 5 men pled not guilty, with John Travis changing his plea to guilty at the very last minute. On the 16th of March 1987, the trial began to a crowd of onlookers, all wanting blood. Signs of "hang the bastards" and dummies of men hanging from buildings adorned the scene, and people actually physically lunged at the police vans that were transporting the men to court as they arrived. They actually had to be held back by the police. And once that trial began, that is when the public finally got to hear the details of that horrific night. We know that Anita had finished her nursing shift at Sydney Hospital and went on to have dinner with friends in Redfern after she had finished. Now, she boarded the 9:21 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown, and when she got off at Blacktown train station, she had gone to call her dad to pick her up, but the only payphone was vandalised and unusable. Now, remember, guys, this was also before mobile phones, and the lack of taxis led her to just go, hey, I'm just going to walk home. That was the fateful decision, to walk home. Hey, I'm just going to walk home. Only 2 witnesses saw her actually leave the train station. Now, at around 10 p.m, Anita was walking along Newtown Road in Blacktown when the 5 men pulled up beside her in their stolen vehicle, and 2 of them jumped out and dragged a kicking and screaming Anita into the car. A teenage boy, his mother, and his younger sister heard her screams and saw her being dragged into the car. The teenage boy heroically ran out to help, but the car sped off before he could reach it. He then raced back into his house and called the police to report the abduction he had just witnessed, and then piled into his neighbour's car, and they drove around the area looking for the vehicle. Now, they drove down Reen Road, now known as Peterbrook Road, and stopped by a deserted Holden and used a spotlight to search the nearby field. Seeing nothing, they believed the car had been dumped, and they drove away. Now, in a tragic twist of fate, Anita was there. She was in that field, but she was just being forced to hide in the long grass with her captors until they left. Once back in the car, Anita was ordered to strip naked, but she refused, begging her captors to let her go, saying she was married and that she was on her period. In return for her pleas, she was punched repeatedly, the punches breaking her nose and cheekbones, and she was forced to perform oral sex on all 5 men. They then drove to a service station, also known as a gas station in certain parts of the world, where they filled up the car with petrol using the money that they had stolen from Anita's purse. They then drove back down Reed Road, back to the secluded paddock where they had been hiding previously, and continued to beat Anita. They then dragged her through the paddock and along the barbed wire fence, where they dumped her and continued the prolonged physical and sexual attack on her for hours. After several hours, the men returned to the stolen car, leaving a barely alive Anita in the paddock, but John Travis was worried about her being able to identify them, so he went back. What happened next is in his own words, as confessed to Miss X. Travis had said, "We were all drunk and she'd fucking seen all of us. I said, she's got to be done, and they said, yeah, go on Johnny, do your bit. So I just cut her." John Travis cut Anita's throat so severely she was almost decapitated, and a coroner testified it would have taken her 2 to 3 minutes to die. 2 to 3 minutes of laying there, beaten and bloodied in unimaginable pain. My God, can you just imagine it? Travis then returned to his gang of monsters in the car and they drove back to his property. Now, a neighbour reported hearing the boys loud and drinking, standing around a fire in the backyard burning something, and they were also heard to be laughing. So, if there was remorse there, they sure as hell weren't showing it. And it is also believed they were burning Anita's belongings. When Anita was found the following day, she had lacerations on her hips, thighs and legs from where she had been dragged over barbed wire, cuts on her hands and fingers from trying to defend herself, resulting in the near loss of 3 fingers. She had endured repeated sexual assaults. Her last hours on earth were absolute hell. And Detective John Wakefield, who's now since retired, was second in charge at Blacktown police station at the time Anita was found. And he said, "The day her body was located will always be etched in my mind. I remember the crime scene as if it was today. The murder scene tells a story, the last moments and what they did to her will always stay with me. The look on her face, the state of her body, it was such a shock for the man who owned the dairy where she was found. Nobody could expect to come across a body like that. When the team of detectives arrived, we found the cattle around her. They were poking her as if trying to wake her." Michael Murphy, one of Anita's murderers who wet himself when he was caught hiding out, tried to paint himself as some kind of a hero and said he didn't want Anita to die. He stated he wanted to leave her there, but John Travis was having none of it. She knew their faces, she knew their names, and she had to go. He told detectives when he was arrested, "I said no, leave her." But there was no way that he was going to leave her. The 4 of us walked away and he came up to the car covered in blood and said, "I cut her throat." He also claimed that after returning to the car, Travis started bragging about what he had done, saying, "I cut her throat. It's me first one." Now, the trial ran for 54 days, and the only defence the group of 5 really had going was their defence convincing the jury of their minimal involvement in Anita's murder. So the only defence they had was trying, I guess, to blame the others and say I had little to do with it. And, as a lawyer, how on earth do you even defend this? How do you even try to defend this? How do you sleep at night knowing you've defended something like this? Anyway, I digress. I'll be back on track. On the 10th of June, all 5 men were found guilty of Anita's murder, and on the 16th of June, they were all sentenced to life imprisonment with 0 possibility of parole. Justice Alan Maxwell described the crime as one of the most horrifying physical and sexual assaults. This was a calculated killing done in cold blood. The executive should grant the same degree of mercy they bestowed on their victim. He then marked their files never to be released. Anita's parents, Gary and Grace Lynch, were there each and every day, a show of dignity and respect for their slain daughter and a comfort for those who grieved with them. All 5 men have spent their time in jail, moving between Long Bay Jail in New South Wales and Goulburn Jail, also in New South Wales. And a few of them have also served time in jails such as Parklea, Maitland, Grafton and Lithgow jails. Now, John Travis racked up another charge in 1996 when he and another prisoner attempted to hacksaw through the back of a moving prison van. And a cellmate named Greg Fisher, who shared a cell with Travis in 2005, described him as having no soul, and that Travis wanted to get a group of law students together, as well as the professor, to take on his case as a project and get him released. Now, when Greg asked his cellmate if he felt guilt about killing Anita, Travis's reply was, "That wasn't me." Or he then went on to say that he had already been punished enough by being in jail and he was now the victim. Gary Murphy was beaten in a shower block in Goulburn Jail by fellow inmates, and he was beaten so severely he was in hospital in a critical condition, but he pulled through. He was transferred to another prison when he was discharged from hospital. Michael Murphy died from liver cancer in Long Bay Hospital in 2019 at the age of 66. As of today, the remaining 4 men who kidnapped, tortured, raped and murdered Anita Cobby are still behind bars in various jails across New South Wales. They will never be released, and just like their partner in crime, Michael Murphy, will eventually die there. Anita's parents, Gary and Grace Lynch, teamed up with the parents of murdered schoolgirl Ebony Simpson, and I have actually spoken about Ebony Simpson's murder in a previous episode if you want to go check that out. They teamed up with Ebony's parents, Peter and Christine Simpson, to form the Homicide Victims Support Group, a support group and space that helps victims of crimes and their families. They also campaigned for tougher truth in sentencing laws, which came to fruition in the years that followed Anita's murder. Gary passed away in 2008 at the age of 90 following a battle with Alzheimer's disease, and Grace passed away from lung cancer in 2013 at the age of 88. At the time of Gary's death, the couple had been married for 54 years. Anita, Gary and Grace are together again at rest in the Pine Grove Memorial Park in New South Wales. So there we have it, listeners. The crime that shocked Australia, broke our hearts and made us furious for the supposed men who tortured and killed a beautiful young nurse, a beautiful caring nurse, for no reason other than their own sadistic needs. You often hear me talk about nature or nurture, and I did say this at the beginning of the episode, and I believe this is the case for all 5 men involved in this murder. It is a case of nature. All 5 men were born evil, and they are pure evil, and that is how they'll stay until they meet their maker. And that's it, guys. Another episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated, done and dusted. Thank you for your company. I appreciate every single one of you. If you have any feedback, any comments, any crimes you would like me to take a deep dive into, please let me know. Reach out. I'm all ears. And please subscribe if you feel the need, or buy me a coffee if you feel the need. And please tell people about me. I'd love for you to get the word out there. And until next time, guys, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. I will catch you all later.